Jung believed that depression signaled the need for a major change or reorganization in her life. This often arises when old conscious attitudes have become stale or ineffective. When we're depressed, our psychic energy withdraws and contracts from the external world and from our consciousness and descends back into the unconscious. Hello, I'm Dr. Michael Hofrath. Today I'd like to talk about depression from a Jungian perspective. Depression is not simply a disorder or a problem to be eliminated, but rather a meaningful transformative experience. Jung viewed depression as a natural process the body uses to counteract resistance to change. Depression is a signal of an imbalance in our conscious attitude that forces us to turn inward and confront neglected or repressed parts of our unconscious. This inward turning and confrontation provide an opportunity for psychological growth and the process of individuation, which is to become whole and more authentically ourselves. We do this by integrating the darker shadow aspects of our psyche. I'll elaborate more on the shadow later in this video. In Jungian philosophy, depression is often caused by the introversion of psychic energy. In other words, most of our energy is directed toward our emotional and mental anguish. This is often due to repression of unconscious content, such as past memories, emotions, thoughts, and desires. Depression is experienced as the ego being depleted of energy, which is one of the reasons why we feel lethargic and sleep more when we're experiencing a low mood or when we feel depressed. There needs to be a restoration back into energetic balance. We can do this by integrating that which has been relegated to the unconscious through repression, suppression, projection, or avoidance into our conscious awareness. In other words, confronting uncomfortable feelings, memories, thoughts, and experiences. Jung believed that symptoms of depression were messages from the unconscious, urging our attention to change. He encouraged exploring our moods deeply, working with our dreams, images that arise, and utilizing creative expression to move unconscious content into conscious awareness to be processed and integrated. Depression in Jungian psychology is purposeful and functional. It leads us to slow down, take pause, reflect, and reconsider our direction in life. Depression assists us in realigning the conscious self with the deeper inner truths, which in turn allows us to realize our true potential. In a sense, depression can be viewed as a transformative process whereby the old ways of being die off to allow the emergence of a more whole and authentic self. According to Jung, depression has a purposeful function in the psyche. He saw depression as the unconscious calling for us to pay attention to whatever imbalances or one-sidedness is playing out in our conscious attitude. Again, the depressive state forces us to turn inward and confront neglected or repressed aspects of the unconscious. The unconscious does this to help us resolve internal conflicts or to deal with something we've been avoiding, which in turn initiates the process of psychological transformation and growth. Jung believed that depression signaled the need for a major change or reorganization in her life. This often arises when old conscious attitudes have become stale or ineffective. When we're depressed, our psychic energy withdraws and contracts from the external world and from our consciousness and descends back into the unconscious. This inward descent allows the accumulation of unconscious contents like instincts, emotions, and unrealized aspects of the personality to be accessed and integrated. Through this integration, we can advance the individuation process and become more whole and more our authentic self. Jung emphasized that depression should not simply be seen as an illness to eradicate, but as a meaningful experience with the potential for creativity, spiritual insight, and renewal. Depression acts as a symbolic death of old ways of being, necessary for the emergence of a renewed psychic life and purpose. In this way, depression's purpose is to facilitate self-reflection, deep inner work, and ultimately psychological growth and transformation. Jung explained the purpose of depression as a psyche-driven process is aiming for balance, integration, and individuation, where depression serves as a guide for needed inner change, rather than merely a pathological condition. Individuation during the depressive episode can be guided through conscious engagement with the unconscious, facilitating integration of repressed or neglected parts of the self, again, for psychological growth. There are many Jungian modalities that can be helpful in working through low mood and depression. Dream work, for instance. The unconscious, which holds our truth, is always trying to get our attention. The easiest way for the unconscious to bring issues or concerns into our conscious awareness is through our dreams. Recording and journaling our dreams is a great way to connect with information the unconscious is attempting to make us aware of, and allows unconscious messages and symbols to come into conscious awareness. In a way, dreams act as a vehicle for unconscious issues to rise into conscious awareness. As a Jungian, we don't analyze dreams. We tend to dreams. And what I mean by this is we approach a dream and the corresponding images, symbols, metaphors that come up as live entities. We ask these images what they need or what they want from us. We all have a higher self, an inner healer, as you will. If we ask the right questions, our inner healer will respond with the right answers. Yes, it does take a little practice to do dream tending, but over time, we can become very adept at understanding what our unconscious and our dreams are trying to convey to us. Another Jungian modality is active imagination. Instead of trying to control our thoughts, we need to observe the stream of spontaneous thoughts and images as they pass through. This involves consciously engaging with inner images and emotions arising from the unconscious while we're awake. Active imagination encourages an inner dialogue with images or symbols that arise from the unconscious to help us integrate disassociated parts of our psyche. Creative expression is another Jungian modality. Activities such as painting, writing, sculpting, or movement such as yoga, Pilates, dancing, Qigong. They're all external ways to tap into the underlying unconscious content that may be fueling our depression so they can move into conscious awareness, which makes them more accessible for integration. Another Jungian modality is facing and feeling our moods. Jung emphasized consciously entering and exploring the depressive mood itself. In other words, allowing fantasies and associations linked to it to rise to the surface, thereby revealing unconscious content that, again, may need to be integrated. Another modality that's very important in Jungian work is shadow work. Recognizing and integrating the shadow, the rejected or disowned parts of the self. Shadow work is the foundation of the individuation process, and the shadow is often intensified during depressive episodes. So all of these methods encourage turning inward rather than avoiding or suppressing depressive feelings, recognizing that depression signals a turning point for inner transformation and greater self-awareness. Yes, guidance from a skilled therapist familiar with Jungian approaches can really be supportive in this process and doing it safely and effectively. Individuation during depression is supported by consciously engaging unconscious content through dreams, active imagination, creative work, and deep introspection, fostering integration and psychological growth despite the challenges of the depressive state. Now, if you're experiencing acute depression, it's really important to engage in shadow work in a very slow and manageable way. So here are a couple things you can do. 1, watch your emotional reactions. Pay attention to any strong emotional responses to others. Often what irritates or emotionally charges us in someone else reflects disowned parts of ourselves. So here is a shadow exercise that allows you to bring unconscious shadow aspects into awareness without deep confrontation, making it much safer for acute depression. We call this the 3-2-1 shadow exercise. So first, choose someone who bothers or who attracts you. 2, describe their qualities that evoke strong emotions. 3, talk to this person in your imagination and express your feelings honestly. 4, take on those qualities yourself. Own them, and you own them with I am blank 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 statements. 5, lastly, notice these qualities within yourself. This structured approach allows for gentle exploration and ownership of shadow traits. You can also have an inner dialogue with the shadow. In other words, visualize and engage in a compassionate conversation with a part of yourself that feels troubled or disowned. Ask that part what it needs or what it wants from you, and ask why that part behaves the way it does. Treat that part of yourself like a troubled child with kindness, compassion, and empathy so it can be safely integrated. Another thing you can do, shadow work, is grounding and emotional regulation. Before and after doing shadow work, practice deep breathing or simple grounding exercises to maintain emotional balance and safety. You can also do journaling. Writing reflections about triggered emotions, shadow qualities, or dialogue experiences helps us process unconscious material safely and at one's own pace. Start small and practice self-compassion. Limit shadow work to short sessions. Avoid harsh self-judgment. It doesn't serve us anymore. If you get overwhelmed, stop. And also, do not hesitate to get professional support if you feel like you need it. These gentle shadow exercises can help us access and integrate shadow content without emotional flooding or overwhelm. Partaking in shadow work slowly during bouts of acute depression allows us to focus on gentle observation of our emotional triggers with structured inner dialogues, imaginative conversations, grounding practices, and compassionate self-inquiry to promote healing. So here are some grounding exercises you can use before engaging in shadow work. Deep breathing. Take slow, deep breaths, focusing on the inhalation and exhalation and the sensation of air entering and leaving your body. This calms the mind and anchors our attention in the present moment while preparing us for inner work. Elemental immersion. Engage with the 4 elements. Walk barefoot on grass, the earth. Breathe deeply, fresh air. Light and watch a candle flame burn, fire. Or drink a glass of water mindfully, water. Connecting with the elements connects us to nature and grounds our energy. Body awareness. Focus on physical sensations. Notice how your feet connect to the ground, or do some mindful yet very gentle stretching. Feel how your body settles as you become more present. This stabilizes your awareness during shadow work. Also, color visualization. Imagine a protective beam or a bubble of light surrounding you in a color that feels safe. Visualize the light anchoring you to the earth and feel how calming and secure that feels. Safe space creation. Designate a quiet spot with comforting objects like cushions, candles, or meaningful items that evoke peace and calm. Being in a safe space supports emotional security and allows us to let go of what we might be holding on to. These grounding practices can cultivate a sense of calm, centeredness, and safety, which are all essential when working with unconscious psychic materia during shadow work. So, in conclusion, doing simple grounding exercises before partaking in shadow work, such as deep breathing, connecting with the elements, body awareness, color visualization, and creating a safe space all serve to establish a stable and secure inner state. Thank you for listening to me today. I'm Dr. Michael Hofrath. Have a good day.